My name's Reagan Simmons, and this is Hidden Signs of ADHD in Women.
Georgia, Harper, Becky, Terry, Tyler.
If I asked you to picture someone with ADHD, who comes to mind? Do you picture a quiet little girl or a hyperactive and loud little boy? If you pictured the boy, you're not alone. But what if I told you that this assumption was one of the biggest reasons many women go undiagnosed with ADHD until adulthood? For decades, research on ADHD was based solely on boys of school age. And because girls' symptoms look different, those symptoms were often overlooked. Rather than being hyperactive and disruptive, most girls exhibited symptoms like inattention, emotional overwhelm, and chronic disorganization. Only recently did psychologists begin to acknowledge that there are big differences between girls' and boys' symptoms and the lasting effects that delayed diagnosis can have on a person. And although you may not have ADHD yourself, the topic is relevant because I can guarantee you know somebody who does have it. Understanding that ADHD doesn't always fit the stereotype we know can help us recognize symptoms earlier, reduce stigma, and better support those around us. You may even recognize experiences in yourself you've never considered. I chose this topic because I was diagnosed last year, right after I turned 31. As I was researching this topic, I realized that a lot of the experiences I was reading about were very relatable to my own, and it made me question how many of my own experiences could have been avoided had I had better information earlier on. Because ADHD presents differently, many go undiagnosed into adulthood, and it leads to delayed treatment, mental health challenges, and frequent misdiagnosis. Today I'll be discussing why women are so often overlooked in their diagnosis. Then we'll talk about the long-term effects of delayed diagnosis, and finally we'll go over why ADHD is so commonly mistaken for other mental health conditions. In The Essentials of Understanding Psychology, Robert Feldman explains that psychological disorders are identified by a series of patterns, although the patterns don't look identical in every individual. Research in females highlights this clearly, since women's symptoms don't align with the traditional symptoms in the diagnostic criteria. Teachers are another reason why girls typically go undiagnosed with ADHD. Teachers are usually the first to raise concern about ADHD in a child. Boys are typically identified due to their hyperactivity, and since girls are less hyperactive and have more problems with concentration and attention, teachers are less likely to recommend those girls for assessment. Not to mention, girls usually don't meet the diagnostic criteria for ADHD because the criteria was developed solely on boys of school age. So they're just not the same. And when these problems aren't visible, these problems don't get investigated. And this is what's going on. This is why so many girls go undiagnosed. And unfortunately, these symptoms don't disappear. They follow women into adulthood. Because these symptoms are missed, many women later develop mental health challenges like anxiety, depression, burnout, and feelings of inadequacy. A study was published in 2025 by Norwegian researchers Cavalli and Peak, exploring experiences of, I think it was 40-something women that had ADHD but weren't diagnosed with it until they were adults. And a lot of those women ended up dealing with long-term emotional, social, occupational, and relationship difficulties because of a late diagnosis. Psychiatrist Daria Long published an article in Brown University's Child and Adolescent Behavior Letter in 2024 talking about outdated understandings of ADHD and societal expectations of women, and how this can contribute to the underdiagnosis and often leads women to seek help only after years and years of untreated symptoms. These issues can manifest in adulthood as chronic burnout, difficulty maintaining boundaries, and emotional exhaustion. This can lead to serious consequences, specifically when symptoms are mistaken for anxiety or depression. Rather than getting help that actually addresses their needs, many spend years managing through incorrect diagnosis and ineffective treatment. Imagine you had a leak under your kitchen sink that had you constantly replacing the floorboards in front of it. Would you just keep replacing the floorboards, or would you look for the source of the leak? That's what's happening today for so many undiagnosed women. The anxiety and depression are being treated, but they don't fully help because the root cause is not being taken care of. Now, that's not to say that anxiety and depression aren't real issues for these women. Most women with ADHD do struggle with both of those things. Other comorbidities include obsessive compulsive tendencies and perfectionist tendencies, which are opposite the ADHD stereotype that most people think of. The problem is that physicians stop at the most prominent diagnosis without digging deeper to figure out what the root issue is. The good news is awareness is improving. Researchers are recognizing that ADHD looks different in everyone, and diagnostic criteria is becoming more inclusive to the way that many girls and women experience the disorder. Earlier recognition means earlier support, better treatment, and less time that these people might spend wondering why life seems so much harder for them than it does everyone else around them. Today I've talked about why ADHD presents differently in women, how delayed diagnosis affects just about every aspect of a woman's life, and why so many women are initially diagnosed incorrectly. If there's anything that you take away from what I've said today, I hope it's that ADHD doesn't always look like you might expect it to, but recognizing that difference could help somebody get the answers they've been searching for. Sometimes the hardest part isn't the diagnosis itself, but it's the years that a woman might spend without one.